Hi, I'm Margie and welcome back to my kitchen. I'm going to show you a cookie that I made and you're going to laugh and go, well, that doesn't look all that great. But this could very well be the best cookie that you ever eat. I learned something when I was very young because my mom used to make cookies for all the teachers and secretaries and people at school because I have 3 siblings, so she was busy making cookies and she was PTA president for all those years. And one thing I did learn was that all these beautiful cookies that she would make, and she'd make these platters up during the holidays, that the best cookies on the plate were not the prettiest ones. So that's really very interesting. Now when I go to parties, I always will eat the cookies that aren't so cute. So something to be said for that maybe. There's a lesson in there somewhere. But anyway, I'm going to get started in just a moment, so I'll be back. When we make these butterscotch walnut squares, you start with an 8x8 pan, and I have it lined. You don't have to line it, but you do need to grease the bottom of it. So if you do line it, I actually have my paper from the butter. I'll even go over that in there, but it's not necessary. But if you don't line it, it's certainly necessary to put some butter in the bottom. And then I have 2 eggs. And I'm going to put a half a teaspoon of vanilla in, and this is 3/4 of a cup of flour with a teaspoon of baking powder. This is 1 cup of walnuts. It calls for black walnuts. These are regular walnuts. It would be actually a little bit better with black walnuts. So we'll go ahead and get started. The way to put the butterscotch part together would be you're going to melt 1/4 of a cup of butter. And then you're going to add sugar. Let that not dissolve so much, it just sort of melts into it, and I'll show you how I do that. And then you're going to add the butterscotch morsels and sort of you'll turn off the heat and you'll let the morsels just melt in from the heat of the butter and the sugar. So the butter is melting, and we'll go ahead and we'll add the sugar. Turn it up a little bit more. That's your cup of brown sugar. We'll go ahead and melt that in the butter. We're going to start by putting 2 eggs into the pan, into our mixing bowl. Being careful not to get any shells in. And they're room temperature. Then we're going to add the half a cup of vanilla. Oh, excuse me, not a half a cup. I don't see my teaspoon, so I'm just going to give it a splash. It's a half a teaspoon. And we're going to bring that together. I'm going to beat that up pretty well. Okay, I've beat these up pretty well. Okay, now I'm going to add the butterscotch and the butter. I'm going to go ahead and just drop that in. We'll bring that together. Now we'll add the flour and the baking powder. Let it mix for a moment, then I'm going to scrape it down. Try to go down to the bottom also, in case any flour got down there. And we'll beat it for another moment. These are the best cookies. If you like a butterscotch cookie, this is the best cookie you'll ever eat. Okay, now I'm gonna put the nuts in by hand. I'm gonna save some of the nuts out to sprinkle on the top, and that's it. That is it. I say that is it, Fort Pitt. I live in Pittsburgh. Because that's what we say around here. I can do it right here. I'll bring my little pan over. Whoop, don't forget to put these in. Just going to save a few nuts out for the top. Just a few. A couple tablespoons are left in there. My next door neighbor is going to love the fact that I made these today. Let's go ahead and we'll pour that in. My oven's been preheating to 350. It won't look like that much batter, but the eggs, the whipped eggs and the baking powder is going to help it to rise. Whenever I make a bar cookie, I always like to push the batter out to the edges from the center just to make sure, because it'll flow back in. At least the edges will be nice and thick. And we'll sprinkle the rest of the nuts on the top. So that's all ready to go into the oven. And that is going to bake for about a half hour, 25 minutes, or half an hour. I just took this out of the oven. It was in there for 25 minutes. I'm going to let this rest, and then I'm going to take the parchment paper right out. See, it's a little soft, it'll bend. So I'm going to wait for it to cool a little bit, then I can lift it directly out of the parchment paper, and then I'll cut it. Now we're going to take these butterscotch brownies or butterscotch squares. They're not really brownies, I guess, because they're not brown with chocolate. Then we're going to take the paper away from the sides, like that. And you can cut them. If you have a nice large knife, it just makes it much easier to cut them. These are very rich with the butter and the butterscotch, so I'm going to make them small. See if you can take them out of the pan. How nice is that to cut them? Put them up on a cooling rack. I just take an offset spatula and just pick up a whole line of butterscotch squares. You can just separate them a little bit to cool. And these really are some of the best little cookies you'll ever have.